All right, live from the Poly Market studio in LA, it's the Young Turks. Cenk Ugranik with you guys. All right, so lots of interesting news today. The election's getting crazy, so new unhinged conspiracy theories are everywhere. We're gonna break down one of them first in a second for you guys. And then new polls are out, and now Democrats are heartbroken. And
ignore the polls, they're wrong.
Yeah, now the Democrats went from ignore the polls, they're totally wrong, to the polls are great and they're definitely right, to back the polls are definitely wrong. So I'm gonna tell you what is actually happening. And there's a critical number in those polls, which I wish it was good news, but unfortunately it's bad news, but it is critical and you have to know it. We'll come back to that in a little bit for you guys, so stay right here. Anna, what do we got?
Well, first, we begin with this.
Allegedly, Haitians are going around and taking people's pets and eating them. The duck pond in a local park is being picked clean. So allegedly, you have Haitians in this town of Springfield, Ohio, that are going by and eating ducks.
These claims are unfounded. And we're gonna get to how these rumors started spreading, what the truth is behind these rumors and more. So let's begin by noting that it's not just Charlie Kirk, but even vice presidential nominee JD Vance is spreading these fear-mongering rumors about Haitian migrants stealing people's pets and eating them. But again, to reiterate, it is not true. Now today, JD Vance posted on X months ago, I raised the issue of Haitian illegal immigrants draining social services and generally causing chaos all over Springfield, Ohio. Reports now show that people have had their pets abducted and eaten by people who shouldn't be in this country. Where is our border czar? And when he says that, of course, he is referring to Kamala Harris. And it's, to me, pretty obvious that this made up claim is being used to attack Kamala Harris for political purposes. But in doing so, what the Republicans are doing is discrediting themselves when it does come to legitimate issues of immigration. We're gonna get to that in just a minute. Now, what are they talking about? Well, the claim that Haitian immigrants were abducting and consuming pets appears to have begun with some right-wing accounts that amplified a report about a local woman by the name of Alexis Telia Farrell, who was arrested in August for killing and eating a cat. But no evidence linked her to being a Haitian or a migrant. Okay, she appears to just be a woman in America who has a severe mental health issue, and she did end up getting arrested. But right-wing figures like Ian Miles Chong, who is not an American but likes to engage in divisive rhetoric that leads Americans to fight with one another, weighed in on this, and he spread the lie anyway. As you can see in this exchange, one person writes drugs, like wondering if the woman did what she did because of drugs, and he said worse, Haitians.
Brother, you're not even an American, man. Talking about, oh, these Haitians, immigrants are the real problem. The mother effers in Malaysia spreading lies about what's going on here. So what business is it of yours? Why don't you just go deal with your own country and leave us alone?
So the rumor may also have originated from an unsubstantiated post in a Springfield Facebook group. The original poster did not cite firsthand knowledge of an incident. Instead, they claimed that their neighbor's daughter's friend had lost her cat and found it hanging from a branch at a Haitian neighbor's home, being carved up to be eaten. Now, there's no evidence to be found indicating that someone in Springfield, Ohio did this. In fact, the Springfield Police Division said Monday morning, meaning today, that they have received no reports in Springfield, Ohio, that someone had stolen someone else's cat to eat them. And Springfield Police Investigations Commander Mike Krantz told Forbes that there have been no credible reports or specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community. In fact, the woman arrested for eating the cat was arrested in a different Ohio town about 100 miles northeast of Springfield, and that was the woman I was referring to earlier, who is not a migrant and is not Haitian. Now, the last bit of evidence some people are citing is this video that you're about to watch. So this took place at a Springfield City Commission meeting last month, alleging that he saw a migrant decapitate a duck. Let's watch.
These Haitians are running into trash cans. They're running into buildings. They're running into, they flipping cars in the middle of the street. And I don't even want to seem like I'm coming down on the immigrants, because it's the people that's bringing them down here. Because wherever they're at, that's what they're used to, bro. They're in the park grabbing up ducks by their neck and cutting their head off and walking off with them and eating them.
So we should note that the man you just heard from is local resident Anthony Harris, who is also allegedly running for mayor of Clark County. According to the Washington Post, the guy carrying the goose, by the way, was photographed in Columbus a month ago and is not obviously an immigrant from Haiti, much less one from Springfield. Nonetheless, right-wingers are running with this whole narrative, including Elon Musk and the official Republican House Judiciary Committee X page. So here's Elon Musk posting about it. That's an AI generated image of Trump hugging a kitten.
You have to clarify, because MAGA might believe it.
No, but that image is hilarious. And then you also have this from Ted Cruz: please vote for Trump so Haitian immigrants don't eat us. So look, this is obviously disgusting and stupid. And if Republicans want people to take their legitimate claims about migrants seriously, they should probably avoid discrediting themselves with nonsense like this.
Yeah, look, guys, if you can't tell that that's not true, I'm not gonna be able to help you. So let me address the people who are frustrated by this, right? So when you see a story like this, all of the red flags should be going off in your head, like, really? Really? There's people in Ohio kidnapping pets and eating them? That is a very unlikely story. Now, if you said that, this is to we often criticize Democrats, but here, especially for Democratic voters, they're better than this. Sorry, Republican voters, you can go cry about it, okay? But if you told Democratic voters, MAGA guys are kidnapping cats and eating them, they wouldn't believe it. They'd say, really? Really? Where's your source on that, okay? You tell MAGA guys that, oh, scary immigrants are kidnapping cats and dogs and eating them. They're like, oh yeah, obviously, I don't need any evidence. Oh, I saw one thing. Oh, I saw some woman, no evidence that she's Haitian at all, because it turns out she isn't. And she did one crazy thing. Oh, it's all Haitians, it's all immigrants, I hate them all. I instantly believe it. Because it only takes one thing to confirm your bias. It takes dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence to unseat a bias. But if you already have a bias, it only takes one thing for you to go, oh yeah, oh definitely, I hate these immigrants. I bet they're eating my cat and dog. So look, that's why it spreads like wildfire. It's insanity. The fact that they can't tell that that's insanity is really sad. And then the demagoguery, oh, the immigrants. Look, guys, we have issues with immigrants. We point them out on the show, and the leftists hate us for it, right? How dare you say that immigrants have any problems? They're all angels. Of course not, they're human beings. There's a range. But if you come with a deranged lunatic conspiracy theory like this, then, and to Anna's point, nobody's gonna believe you about anything that immigrants do. Like we're trying to have a rational discussion here, guys. What should be our immigration policy? What is the humane thing to do? What is the best thing to do to protect Americans, to have a real process, etc. And instead, we got one side saying, no, every immigrant's an angel, we shouldn't do anything, etc. The other side saying, oh, they all eat cats and dogs. Now, we're stuck in the middle with you guys. So come on, how could you not tell that's crazy and wrong? All right.
We gotta get to a point where members of both sides of the political aisle find a way to tether themselves to reality.
Yes.
Because if you don't agree on what the issues actually are, you will never find a solution. And that's the reason why things continue to devolve in America. And Cenk, look, I don't want to get into a qualitative debate analysis right now about which voters are the best, but I mean, you can provide mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence to some Democratic voters, and they will reject it if the mountain of evidence that you're providing them agrees with something that the right wing believes. But guys, we have to be receptive to reality and to the receipts, to the facts. In this case, there are no facts. There is no evidence to back up these claims being made by Republicans. And when they make these types of claims, not only does it direct all sorts of hatred toward people that they're smearing, right? I mean, think about what they're saying about Haitians as a whole here. But it also leads to people who might be receptive to their arguments discrediting them entirely, because why would you believe anything that comes out of Ted Cruz's mouth if he's spreading this lie? Why would you believe anything coming out of JD Vance's mouth if he's spreading this lie?
So look, Anna, you could say, hey, maybe you could tell an outrageous lie that Democrats would believe if it suited their purposes. It wouldn't be this one, it would be a different one. Like, Biden is not too old. He's young and dynamic behind the scenes.
Dianne Feinstein,
He's totally fine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, right before she died. Okay, but so I hear you on all that, and that's what we fight against all day. But guys, look, if you don't want people to think you're an unhinged lunatic, don't spread unhinged lunatic conspiracy theories. It's not that complicated. But in this case, this is so above and beyond anything else that it takes extraordinary evidence. So that you look into it for 1 second and the cops say there's been no reports of that. That should end it for you. But no, JD Vance and Ted Cruz, that's the vice presidential candidate and a senator spreading utter nonsense. And remember, they're not a rando online that saw one video and didn't see any context and believed it. They know it's a lie. They know with great certainty that it's a lie.
Exactly.
And they spread that lunatic stuff anyway because they want you to hate immigrants.
And I also want to talk about the specific location that they decided to spread this lie in. This, this defamatory claim that will direct hatred toward a very specific group of people. So they're talking about Springfield, Ohio, right? And it is true that that community has been grappling with an influx of migrants coming in with the limited resources that they have. So tensions are already high. And then you throw this kind of defamatory fuel on the fire. And what do you think is gonna happen? So it's not only a lie, it's not only wrong, but it also creates conflict where people could potentially get hurt, while also leading to no solutions about the actual issues at play here, right? So let's talk about what those issues are. So as I mentioned, there have been some tensions growing in Springfield, Ohio, because of an influx of Haitian migrants. A Biden administration policy provided temporary protected status to hundreds of thousands of Haitian immigrants, or migrants, I should say, who have left their home country because of ongoing violence. Some estimates say as many as 20,000 people from Haiti have come to the city. The speed and volume of arrivals have put pressure on housing, schools, and hospitals. The community health clinic saw a 13-fold increase in Haitian patients between 2021 and 2023, from 115 to 1,500, overwhelming its staff and budget. So that is real. That is a real issue. And if you want to find a solution to that issue, that's where we should be having the conversation. But demagoguing and smearing people for a political victory here is just a really sick and gross way to go about it. And it's not really finding solutions for anything. And then, by the way, at the same time, the New York Times also reported the influx of migrants has helped revitalize what was a shrinking economy in Springfield. And NPR reported immigrants have opened restaurants and helped fill labor shortages. And I'm sure that's true to some extent, but I don't think it's fair for any particular town, city, or state to bear the burden of an influx of migrants without help from the federal government, which is supposed to be taking care of this matter, and they have dropped the ball. It's clear.
Yeah, so look, here's what rational people should do. Let's all as a country come together on rules. What are the rules that we want? How can you apply for asylum? How many people do we want coming into the country legally? And then let's enforce those rules. But we don't do any of that. And the reason we don't do any of that is because, again, as always, politics is corrupt in this country. So a lot of businesses love undocumented immigrants because they use them as cheap labor.
Right.
So they don't want it fixed. If it was fixed, they would have to pay them minimum wage or higher, and they don't want to pay them that. So that's why they like the system broken. And so both sets of politicians, Democrats and Republicans, work for those donors. So they never bother fixing it.
Exactly.
And then both sides use it to demagogue. So the Republicans way more so on this issue. Oh, look at these people who are foreigners and different and look different and act different than us. I bet they're eating our cats and dogs, and that kind of insane, ludicrous demagoguery loaded up with racial stereotypes, okay? And the Democrats demagogue by going, oh my God, if you're not for all the undocumented immigrants or immigrants in general, that means you're racist, etc. And you could be, as I just explained, Or it might be that you think, yeah, but I don't know that Springfield, Ohio can handle that many immigrants.
Right.
So let's figure out, how do we handle immigrants? How many? And what's the process? And what's the fair, just thing to do for them and for us?
Yeah, and look, let me just communicate this as calmly as I can, because I do want to understand where leftists fall on these very specific issues, right? So they like the idea of open borders, leftists do, not Democrats in general, clearly, but leftists do. How do you reconcile the fact that workers in this country, for the first time in many decades, had leverage to negotiate for higher wages because there was a labor shortage? So how do you reconcile that fact with the idea of open borders, where people would come in and work for far less and disempower American workers? How do you also reconcile the very real issue that we're dealing with, not just in Ohio, but all across the country, where there's a housing shortage, but you have a lot of people coming in and we don't have the resources to house them, the resources to ensure that they're taken care of, right?
Yeah.
All of these issues are difficult, and you're not allowed to have a debate about it, because if you do, you bring it up. It's not just about racism, it's also about how do we do this in a way that's fair to everyone involved, including American citizens.
Yeah, I don't even want to have that debate, honestly.
Why? It's an important debate to have.
No. I mean with the leftists, because they're irrelevant. Like if by leftists you mean someone in this particular case that's for open borders, that is not a legitimate issue. No one in America wants open borders. That would come out about maybe 96-4 if you did a poll, right? And I'm being generous to the leftists. So if you're actually, and I'm not saying all leftists want this, okay? I want to be clear. But for the ones who say, yeah, open borders, probably the same people who say no prisons, no cops, no one agrees with you. So you can have that, and you can hate me, that's okay, that I'm not on your side. And that's totally clear. But the other people that are not on your side is the overwhelming majority of Democratic voters.
Right.
If you put it to a poll for Democratic voters, would you like open borders where anyone can come into the country with no laws? They would scream, no, okay? Forget the Republican voters. So if you're online and you think that open borders is cool and hip and hot, and you think that that's what the majority of the left thinks, you have no idea how tiny your bubble is and the fact that you can't see outside of it.
Totally agree. All right, let's move on to some other unfortunate news, to say the least, and it has to do with Donald Trump's rhetoric recently in regard to the election. So Donald Trump is now threatening to go after election workers and political operatives with long-term prison sentences for supposedly cheating him out of an electoral win. I just want to note that there are still several weeks until the election. He's already planting the seeds that the election is going to be stolen from him. This is what he did in 2020 in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election. He's doing it again, and he's threatening to imprison political opponents. So Trump made the following Truth Social post on Saturday. We broke it down piece by piece to read it to you. And so he writes, cease and desist. I, together with many attorneys and legal scholars, am watching the sanctity of the 2024 presidential election very closely, because I know better than most the rampant cheating and skullduggery that has taken place by the Democrats in the 2020 presidential election. Now stick around for the two recent examples of Trump admitting on camera that the election wasn't stolen from him and he actually lost the election, but I'll continue. Therefore, the 2024 election, where votes have just started being cast, he's referring to like absentee ballots, will be under the closest professional scrutiny. And when I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences, so that this depravity of justice does not happen again. And finally, he writes, please beware that this legal exposure extends to lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, and corrupt election officials. Those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, and prosecuted at levels, unfortunately, never seen before in our country. And he later doubled down on this kind of messaging the next day on Sunday. He also made some baseless claims about election fraud, saying on Truth Social that he expects to win the key swing states, the key swing state of Pennsylvania. He said an interview by Tucker Carlson of an election expert indicates that 20% of the mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania are fraudulent.
Come on.
Just totally made up, okay? Here we go again. Where is the US Attorney General and FBI to investigate? Where is the Pennsylvania Republican Party? We will win Pennsylvania by a lot unless the Dems are allowed to cheat. The RNC must activate now. But just recently, in two different instances, two different events, Trump admitted that he lost the 2020 election. I'm going to show you those videos in a second, but Cenk, jump in.
So look, again, when you tell MAGA, hey guys, the guy's unhinged, they're like, oh, show me one thing. As if he has, I can show you hundreds of unhinged things that Donald Trump has done. TrumpBrackets.com, we had to like narrow it down to 64 from hundreds and hundreds. And here's another example. Guys, do you understand that if 20% of the mail-in ballots were fraudulent, that would be the largest fraud in American history by a landslide? It would be the most overwhelming case of fraud. Every local, state, and federal cop would be on it. Whether it was for Republicans or Democrats, it would be a gigantic story. It's not something that flies under the radar. It's not like, oh, Jim Bob and his dumbass friend did voter fraud and voted for their moms, okay? So that's gigantic. You think, oh, he did his true social, 20% of them are mail-in, because Tucker Carlson, almost everything he says is a lie. Of course that's not true. There's no evidence of it. There's no authorities that say that that's true. No Republican authorities, no anything. Trump and Tucker Carlson give you one lie after another after another. It's a factory of lies and absurd, over the top lies. Yet we have to sit here and debate whether he's crazy or not. And then, look, the sense that this guy could win is unreal to me. So if you think that, oh yeah, the election was stolen from him, you're lost. You're a lost soul. You don't realize. You remind me of, funny enough, of people in Washington D.C. who have no idea why populists exist. They think the status quo is wonderful. They don't understand why there's a single problem in the country because they're so rich and happy, right? And the MAGA guys that are as deluded by Trump remind me of the same thing. They're like, I don't get it. We know that we can't possibly lose an election. And even though we never ever have any evidence, we're sure that every election we lost is stolen. You sound crazy. And now Trump will show you that he actually did lose the election.
So let's go to the first video. So just to give you some background, well, actually, first, let's talk about Pennsylvania briefly, right? Because Pennsylvania is a pivotal state for Trump or Kamala Harris to win in order to win enough electoral college votes. So if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he'll end up getting 287 electoral college votes, while Kamala likely will get 251. So if Kamala wins Pennsylvania, then Trump would likely secure 270. Hold on, I wrote my notes totally incorrectly. But my point is, in order to win enough electoral college votes based on how the rest of the states are likely to vote, Pennsylvania is critical. Like Trump or Kamala needs to win it in order to win the overall presidential election.
But bottom line, really easy to remember. Look, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin are the three most important states, and of those, by far the most important is Pennsylvania. Both of them have to win Pennsylvania.
Exactly. So with that said, let's go to this video where you'll see where they both stand in the current polling.
Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. And what we see is a tightening race in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All right, this is Harris versus Trump margin in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A month ago, when you looked at the polls, New York Times +4 Harris, +3 Quinnipiac for Harris, Franklin and Marshall +3 for Harris. But look at polls that have come out over the last week or so, and what do we see? We see a much tighter race. We see a tie in the CBS YouGov poll. We see a tie in the CNN SSRS poll. And this, to me, is part of an emerging pattern, which is in a very pivotal state. What we saw was a small Harris lead, but within the margin of error, becoming a race that is way, way, way too close to call at this particular point.
So that's the reason why Trump specifically posted about Pennsylvania. He knows what the stakes are, and he knows that it's important to win that state. And so he's already planting a seed about alleged election fraud or ballot fraud in that state in order to get his supporters riled up. But he hasn't provided any evidence of that. It's a completely fabricated claim. Now, Cenk, did you want to weigh in on that?
Just real quick, later in the show, we're going to talk about the New York Times poll. So the polling showing that Kamala Harris' lead is slipping is real. So those numbers are real. Pennsylvania is very much a toss-up now. I'm going to come back later to the main point of the story, which is Trump threatening to put anyone in prison that doesn't agree to his outrageous lies.
Right.
Okay, but first let's show you what he kind of thinks, apparently thinks.
So here he is at the Moms for Liberty conference. In this exchange, he very clearly concedes what the reality was of the 2020 election results.
We got 63 million votes in the first election. I was told that if we get 63 million votes, same number, there's no way we can be defeated. I got 10 or 12 million votes more than that, more than anybody had ever got. We got the most votes of anybody, of any sitting president in history. And he beat us by a whisker.
Now, I can hear in the tone of his voice, it was difficult to admit that, but he did admit that. Biden beat us by a whisker, and that is true in some of the swing states. And by the way, he said the same thing while speaking to Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman had a one-on-one interview with Donald Trump last week. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
But I've done well with debates. I mean, I became president. Then the second time, I got millions more votes than I got the first time. I was told, if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that, and lost by a whisker.
But he keeps going back and forth because he also spoke at an event for the Fraternal Order of Police. And during that event, he said, I hope you watch for voter fraud. Watch for the voter fraud because we win without voter fraud. You can keep it down just by watching because believe it or not, they're afraid of that badge. They're afraid of you people. So again, implying that the reason why he lost in 2020 was due to voter fraud that he has failed to provide any evidence of or any evidence for. And look, the only area where the right wing might have a point, and I don't think that this helps Democrats, even though I understand why they're doing it, is there's this effort to get RFK Jr. off of the ballots in swing states. Now it's ironic because he had to fight and carry out lawsuits in order to ensure that he was on the ballots. Now that he has dropped out and he has endorsed Donald Trump, and he was clear that he wanted to drop out and endorse Donald Trump because he wanted to help Trump win, and he was a spoiler candidate for Trump in some of these swing states if he remained in the race. Now he wants his name off the ballots, and the states are really pushing back on it. One of the states that has obliged, although it has created a lot of problems, is North Carolina. Now, North Carolina had already sent out their absentee ballots, and now they have to delay everything in order to essentially send out new ballots and get those people who have already submitted ballots to vote again. So that is an issue. Let's keep it real. But the way that it's gonna seem to Trump voters or Trump supporters for the states that refuse to do this, like Michigan, the state Supreme Court in Michigan just rejected the idea of taking RFK Jr. off the ballot. Trump supporters are going to look at that as Democrats trying to rig the election.
No, I give no quarter to Republicans on this.
No, I know, I get it, but
no, I don't want to. It's not a 50-50 issue. It's a 99-1 issue. It might be a 100-0 issue. When it's 50-50, we tell you. When anyways. So there is no a real issue. In fact, Donald Trump is encouraging all the Republican voters, do mail-in voting, do early voting. What happened? What happened? I thought you said it was all fraudulent. No, you don't want the others to do mail-in voting. You want your side to do mail-in voting. And you're a gigantic liar in every way. And he's also a dumbass. So he keeps saying in those interviews, well, I had 63 million and they told me if I get 63 million, I'm gonna win. Yeah, one of your dumbass advisors told you that. Because they're all stupid and couldn't realize, oh, maybe the other guy might get more. That the new Democratic opponent you have might be a lot more popular than Hillary Clinton was in 2016. And that never occurred to you knuckleheads. So did he get more than 63 million? Yeah, he got all the way up to 74 million, which is an amazing number, okay? And so that is 9 million more, not 10 or 12, but it's 9. But it turns out Biden got 81 million votes. He's like, no, if I got that many, I must have won. That's not how elections work. And I know you can't get into your tiny, tiny little mind that, oh, if I get more votes, I might still lose because the other guy might get even more votes. It hasn't occurred to him. So why is he now saying that he did lose the election? Because his advisors told him, hey, when we do polling, people are super annoyed that you're still lying about the 2020 election. And some people want to vote for you because they can't stand the establishment or they don't like Democrats or whatever it might be. But there's pausing because you keep saying Oh my God, if I ever lose an election, I'll never accept it. And it seems like you're kind of dictatorial and you never want to actually accept democracy. So can you please go out there and lie and say, because Trump, I don't know what he actually thinks, forget that. So, but please say that you lost the election so we can move on, right? So he goes and does 2 interviews and says, I lost the election. But he can't help himself. You can't teach him anything. So the minute those 2 interviews are done, he goes back to, I didn't lose, it's all fake. Everything is fake. Yeah, I know. What a spoiled little baby. I loathe this man. I can't stand his nonstop lies. Now, much more important and dangerous is he says long prison sentences for anyone who doesn't acknowledge a thing I made up about 20% of mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania being fake. Okay, where's your evidence for that? Never presents any evidence. He goes, doesn't matter. I'm gonna put you in prison. And by the way, I want the cops to go, as we showed you that, to go to voting booths, and that intimidates people. He's basically saying, and we got another story in the show today about how in Florida they're trying to intimidate people who signed a ballot measure on abortion. They're sending cops to their houses. They're using the cops like fascists to go intimidate people. And they say, you better not vote against us. Oh yeah, you guys you're really in favor of democracy. No, this is why people think that Donald Trump doesn't believe in democracy. Because if he loses or his side loses, he lies and threatens to put people in prison who don't agree with his lies. So, okay, you want to risk democracy, you want to risk America, put this madman, this raging lunatic into office, and then we'll all see what happens for 4 disastrous years. I don't know that we survived that.
Well, journalist Olivia Nuzzi was smeared by Democrats for daring to tell the truth about Biden's mental decline. In fact, they're trying to destroy a series that she worked on that's coming out. So we're gonna have her on the show when we come back from the break and discuss what her experience has been. Don't miss it.
Now I'm gonna do something very different here and read some 1-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These 2 would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point, because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are, in fact, unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter, and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, found this podcast from the true crime podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Z55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together. You know that viral video you saw of me? First of all, it's bull. Second of all, they got it from a snippet of the live show. You should check out the live show so you see the full context of everything we say. Weekdays, 6 o'clock Eastern, Young Turks on YouTube or wherever you get TYT.
The support we receive from members is the backbone of our movement to drive positive change. We need viewers like you to keep moving forward. Visit tyt.com/team and join our movement today.
All right, back on TYT, Jake and Anna with you guys. Also Stephen Robinson and Petra Montgomery, who just became members by hitting the join button below the video. We appreciate you guys. We got a great interview for you next.
Yep. Well, it's rough out there for journalists, especially when small mobs of people can easily get you fired or demoted over their grievances in how stories are reported or whether an inconvenient truth is shared with the public. And that's certainly something that happened to journalist Olivia Nuzzi. Now, back in July, Nuzzi was announced to lead a 6-episode interview series titled Working Capital on Bloomberg TV's network. And according to Variety, it focuses on candid exchanges with political and business leaders. There was supposed to be this big PR campaign around it in order to promote it, to ensure that it does well. But after a group of Democrats complained to Bloomberg about Nuzzi's reporting on Biden, it appears that they might have scrapped that PR campaign altogether. Now, what are they upset about? A piece that she wrote for Intelligencer, New York Magazine, the conspiracy of silence to protect Joe Biden, the president's mental decline, was like a dark family secret for many elite supporters. And this same group of people also dug into her tweets from many, many years ago, where she's obviously joking, to paint her as some sort of racist, which she is not. Now, joining us to speak about this whole incident is the journalist herself, Olivia Nuzzi. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So give us the details about what ended up happening with this PR campaign. Did they really scrap it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I published the story on July 4th. I always love to celebrate July 4th by publishing a tough piece about whoever the sitting president is. And some Democrats, very predictably, I write feature stories. I cover the presidency, I cover presidential campaigns. Anytime I write a story that's tough on a Democrat, I'm accused of being a conservative activist. Anytime I write a story that's tough on a conservative, I'm accused of being a liberal activist. This is something that I kind of just expect at this point, and it doesn't surprise me. Now, it didn't surprise me either that a big media corporation like Bloomberg would be very frightened about even just the faintest murmurs of a potential optics crisis. These are companies that pay PR professionals, probably on a retainer that's much more than most journalists get paid, to avoid any sort of PR calamity, and they're very worried about having to deal with any pain campaign related to any of the content that they're producing. So I wasn't surprised exactly about their reaction to it, but I was disappointed, obviously, and I think companies like that, especially companies that are so flush with cash, they're sort of in a position to fight back against cancel culture. I know people don't like that phrase, and it's been sort of politicized beyond recognition, but that's what this is. And I think that they should use that power that they have and kind of make some more courageous decisions. And I hope that they do so in the future.
I appreciate it, sister. I totally agree with you. I guess my follow-up question to you is, why is this group of Democrats so unhinged? Because, I mean, they're upset at your piece in just simply stating the truth about Biden's mental decline and what people around Biden were saying, not publicly, but internally and all of that. So because of reporting like that, and because of the realization that Biden isn't fit to run or serve in another term, we have a better candidate running against Donald Trump, thus making the election a lot more competitive. Have these individuals come to terms with that, or are they still in denial?
I think there's always a tendency to shoot the messenger, and that's on both sides. I certainly experienced this covering Donald Trump's political rise and covering his White House. Most of his supporters were not happy with me most of the time and let me know it. But I have noticed, covering Joe Biden, covering him even in the 2020 primary, there is this sense that he's sort of made of glass, and that the tiniest breeze of criticism could make him shatter, and that there's this urge to protect him from any sort of scrutiny, which I am opposed to, obviously, as a member of the press. I know you are all opposed to that as well. And my view is I'm not concerned with outcomes. I don't view that as my role as a journalist. I'm just concerned with writing the most fair and accurate stories possible. And I understand why people are they're angry about the way that our politics are, and they're looking for people to blame. And I understand why they arrive at the decision, whether it's conscious or not, that members of the press who are delivering information that they don't like or that they wish was not true, why we are often the ones to blame. And I don't feel I don't feel aggrieved by it at all. I sort of get it.
Yeah, so look, we deal with that all the time. And so if you criticize any Democrat, they'll say, oh, you want Trump to win. It's not my job to want or not want Trump to win. It's my job to deliver the news, which is reality-based and truth-based.
Yeah.
And so, and implicit in that is, why don't you do propaganda for us? Like that's as if that's what media should do, and I can get into a long conversation about why they have that assumption. But what I'm curious about is the mechanics here, Olivia. So these people who come after you to say Bloomberg don't air this or don't promote this, etc. Who are they? Do we think that they're Democratic like consultants, lobbyists, trolls, or are they real people who are just like angry that you've offended their dear leader?
It's probably a combination. I'm sure that those groups feed off of one another. I'm sure there's some sort of psyop element to it a little bit, but I think that people genuinely got very upset. And it's this terrible irony, I guess. A lot of the same people who, when I report critically on Donald Trump, if I utilize anonymous sources, let's say in service to reporting on Donald Trump, reporting on his campaigns or his White House in the most accurate way that I can, those people will praise you to the high heavens for doing that. If you utilize any of those same methods to report critically on establishment Democrats and on President Joe Biden, you are just raked over the coals for it. So there's this total, these two universes that these people operate in when it comes to how they judge the veracity of reporting and whether or not reporting is okay at all when it comes to a Republican or when it comes to a Democrat. And it's not something that surprised me. I've seen it a lot. I've been covering, what exists of the Democratic primary over the course of the last year and a half. I've been working on a project about Marianne Williamson, so I've seen that from kind of that vantage point a lot during that process, unrelated to my work for New York York Magazine. And so I wasn't surprised by any of this. I was a little surprised by how tiny the outrage was and how Bloomberg reacted to it anyway. I did think that was, sad and like deeply amusing.
Totally.
But these companies are risk averse. They're trying to avoid risk. And there's some irony. I think they want characters, they want personalities like you guys who have big followings or who are perceived as being influential. And then when they get that, they're terrified about the actual implications of that.
Yeah, so that part I'm totally familiar with. Like Bloomberg as an example, but it could be anybody really. It's almost all the major media companies. They're like, oh, we want, exactly like you said, we want your following, but we don't want how you got there. When you come here, we want you to be boring, insipid. Don't say any of the things that you said before, say the opposite. Well, then you don't want me. So let's just move on and you do your boring crap and I'll do my real reporting here. But anyways, I want to come back to the Blue MAGA because I'm curious, do you think that they thought you were just lying and making up sources and you just had a personal grudge against Biden, so you just pretended he was old when he's actually young? Or did they know, in your estimation, that of course you're telling the truth, but they don't want you to tell the truth because then Biden might lose, so shh?
I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of those things. I don't read, everything that someone who's angry tweets at me. I shut my mentions off in 2016 and I haven't turned them back on. Sometimes I'll look out of curiosity or I'll read the comments out of curiosity. New York Magazine happens to have a pretty robust and relatively intelligent comment section that I find pretty valuable to take a look at what they're all saying. So I do see some of it, but I don't, obsess over refreshing my mentions or anything like that. I don't understand people who can live that way. But I think it was a combination. I also think, context gets lost. And in the context of the internet of like 2009 or the early, 2010s, when I was genuinely a Democratic activist, right? My job, I was an intern for a group where my job was to ghostwrite op-eds in support of the passage of the Affordable Care Act when I was in high school. And in my free time, I thought it was really funny to troll people who were Tea Party activists on the internet. And I would kind of tweet dumb things using their hashtag. And because of the way that I look, I think they thought that I was one of them. And that was just something I liked to do in my spare time as a sort of internet troll as a teenager. And divorced from the context of that internet, though, of the Obama era, I guess I could see how, if some semi-respectable people you follow online in the year of our Lord 2024 say that I was earnestly a birther or something, taking those people seriously and not thinking too hard about, what was the internet like at that time? And does it really seem believable that, a decade's worth of my journalism is refuted by some silly tweets from that period of time? But I don't know, I try and always talk to the smartest person in the room, and I have to hope that most people whose opinion I would value on any other subject would not be so naive and so gullible as to buy into that narrative.
Yeah, I want to talk about that briefly because either the era of Donald Trump broke people's brains or we have like a serious competency problem in America, because I want to show the tweets that they weaponized against you. They're obvious jokes. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can tell they're obvious jokes. By the way, the third option, which could be very likely, is intentionally misinterpreting your jokes, pretending like they're real and you meant it in order to paint you as some sort of racist to get you fired. But here's one example. Kenyan anti-colonial shows teeth to small child. Retweet White House, happy Pi Day. I mean, that's so obviously a joke. Here's another one. Do you think Obama ever gets tired of being a secret Kenyan Muslim lizard person who plots terror attacks from the White House? And by the way, they went back like over a decade in order to find these tweets, potentially intentionally misinterpret them to paint you as some sort of racist to try to get you fired. And luckily they didn't scrap your series, but Bloomberg decided to scrap the PR campaign around your series, which is insane to me. But look, final question for me, Olivia, is there's this question of access, right? And we talk about it here at TYT often. If you are too critical of a politician or a party, they're less likely to sit down and talk with you. A lot of journalists are concerned about losing access. And I think that leads some to treat these politicians with kid gloves. You say that you're willing to put out these tough pieces. What has your experience been in terms of access after you put these pieces out?
You know, the Biden White House, or I guess it's just sort of the Biden inner circle, never really got over my coverage of him during the 2020 campaign cycle, or the primary cycle rather. You know, I wrote at the time that there were concerns, implicit or explicit, about his ability to stay agile and alive for 4 more years. You all remember, I'm sure, better than a lot of other people remember, that that was a big part of the conversation about whether or not he ought to be the nominee in 2020. They never really forgot that or fully forgave it, and they always treated me with skepticism. I have found them to be way more locked down than other campaigns or other members of other political parties, certainly. Whereas I've found, I think leadership is determined by whoever is at the top. And I find that dealing with Trump, for instance, I have a big piece out today with interviews with Donald Trump. He got very mad at me about 1.5 years, 2 years ago after an interview with me. He called me dumb as rocks, unattractive. He did the whole Trumpian name thing in response to the piece. And I figured it would take a while for him to come back and do another interview with me, but I knew that he would, because that's just sort of how he is. He lets out his temper and then he gets over it eventually, if you keep trying. And so there is the huge difference. And I really think it just depends on who the executive is in question, and the kind of culture that they foster. And when it came to Joe Biden, I think he never really had a good relationship with the press. He blamed the press for his first presidential campaign not going well, for the plagiarism accusations. He blamed the press for coverage of him going into the 2016 race and whether or not he should run to be the Democratic nominee. And he blamed the press for negative coverage of him during the 2020 primary. And they have a very bitter sort of attitude towards the media. And I think it's hurt them. I think it's very similar to Hillary Clinton, where this sort of impulse to protect yourself and protect your campaign and keep people who maybe are not totally with you away actually makes you look paranoid, and it prevents you from having a better relationship with the public because you're not talking to them directly as much. And I think we're seeing this already with Kamala Harris not being very accessible to the media. And I think long term, it will negatively affect her campaign.
Yeah, look, there's so many things that are so nuts. This is gonna lead into the question. So number one, I think you guys, both you and Anna, are too generous to these folks. They're definitely lying. They're definitely misinterpreting your joke on purpose. They're definitely trying to smear you. I've been through it many, many times. And then there are complicit people, tons of them in mainstream media, who love to take Democratic lies and then print them and go, oh, golly gee, I didn't know it was a joke. Really, you're that dumb? Please. Okay, but having said that, that gets to my question, which is, the establishment, in my opinion, is also in their own bubble. Not my opinion, it's a fact. Everybody's in their own bubble. So we always look at our own bubble and go, wait, are we sure we're right? What's objective reality, et cetera, right? I never see MAGA doing that. Donald Trump could tell, I mean, today they came out with Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs, and everybody instantly believed it, right? Insanity, right? But then in the Democratic bubble, in the blue MAGA, Biden is young and dynamic behind the scenes. They instantly believe it, and they'll attack you if you don't, et cetera. But my question is, for the establishment that's in DC, including mainstream media reporters who you know a lot of them, right? And including the mainstream politicians, Republican and Democrat, do they understand how much they are hated in this country? Do they understand that they represent the status quo and that most people think that they're giant liars because they keep saying that politicians are honest and they don't point out that they're all taking giant donor money and obviously doing what the donors want them to do? And that it's driving the country crazy that they won't admit the most obvious thing in the world, overwhelming corruption, right? Do they have, my sense is that they don't realize that at all. They think that they're angels and they represent objective reality, and that there's nothing much wrong with the system or the status quo. So, but you're in it a lot more than I am. So it's a legitimate, real question. Like, do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated? Or do they not realize that at all?
They realize it. I mean, I think it's It is a monolith to some extent, but I think there are different people who are different levels of self-aware within that, right? David Foster Wallace gave a commencement address once, and he had this story about these two fish who were sort of swimming along, and one of the fish says something about water to the other fish, and the second fish says, "What's water?" It's sort of like that, right? Where I think people are so deeply in their little universe where they're seeing the same types of people all the time. Everyone is also in that universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing, and just kind of keep swimming along, not realizing what you're a part of. And I think a lot of groupthink really explains it more than malice and more than individuals choosing to do something bad or to be cowardly. And I think I realized this when I was reporting that Biden piece. I hadn't been a part of the press pool. It's just not something that I do in my capacity as Washington correspondent. But I joined the press pool, which is like this traveling group of reporters who are always with the sitting president, and they keep tabs on his movement. And I asked to join to go to some fundraisers so that I could see the president up close for this story. And while I was there, I was talking to the other reporters who are people that I know, who are kind of common presence in this press pool, who are always in rotation. And I was shocked by the things that I was learning from them, just the things that for them were just totally normal parts of covering the president, but to me just seemed like a scandal, right? Where the radio pooler from a network whose job is to get audio and give it out to the rest of the radio stations, told me that often there's just not usable audio because the president doesn't speak very clearly. I was part of the reporters standing there listening to the president speak. I was straining my neck and trying to find a way to hear him, just like everyone else was, even though none of the other speakers at this event were difficult to hear. And when I talked later to the rest of the members of the press pool, they said, "Oh yeah, this is a common thing where we're all sitting around afterwards saying, 'Did you hear that? Did he phrase it that way? Are you sure that's what he said? Where in the audio exactly was that?'" And everyone's sitting around listening to their audio, trying to decipher it to figure out what on earth the president just said. I thought that this was remarkable and shocking, and absolutely worth telling the world about in my story. But when you're in that every day, when you're part of a beat, you're a beat reporter, and this is true in general across the board, no matter what your beat is, a lot of things start to feel normal and start to feel like just a part of the job, and you don't have enough perspective to say, this shouldn't be this way, or it's remarkable that it is this way. And that's why, I think there's a lot of value in coming in as a bit of an outsider and taking a look at this stuff for yourself and then reporting back.
Yeah, Olivia, great conversation. It's nice to have a conversation where we have shared language on objective reality. So can you let our audience know when your interview shows, when and where it is?
It is on Bloomberg. You can see it on Bloomberg Originals on streaming. I hope you watch it, but it's I guess they would prefer that you didn't. Is really the answer.
well, then let's defy them.
Let's do exactly what they don't want us to do. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you, Olivia. We appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a quick break, guys. We'll be right back. We're doing that Be Our Russians campaign. We started it on, just on Friday, right? And so what we're saying is, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, et cetera, got $100,000 a video. Can you guys give us $100,000? And we did one day of it, got $3,450. You see how hard it is to raise money when you're actually using real people and a real audience, etc. So that's why when it's like, they're like, oh, $100,000 popped up, $400,000 a month popped up. Oh, and they wanted us to say how great Russia is and how terrible Ukraine is and etc. Golly gee, I wonder where it came from. Anyway, tyt.com/team, you're the guys that we rely on and that allow us to do the thing that we're doing, and we serve you. So tyt.com/team, we appreciate you guys. Megan Bramble, thank you for the donation on Super Chat. Titan wrote in, Cenk, you don't know if we survive another 4 years. I'm not sure we've survived the first. Majority of our current ailments began with Reagan, and every president since has reinforced them. Trump may be a new Reagan in how politics work. So as I explained in my book, Justice Coming, they really began in 1978 because of the Supreme Court decisions, where corporations started to take over politics. And so we live under corporate rule. Are we surviving? Yeah, we're in the trash compactor scene in Star Wars. We haven't quite been crushed yet, but we're almost there. So if they start arresting people who disagree with the government, well, that's the part where I'm worried we're not going to survive. And no, Republicans, Donald Trump breaking every goddamn rule and law in the book and getting arrested for it doesn't mean the government is arresting anybody who doesn't agree with them. So I know, nuance, impossible. But we got to get rid of this cloak of corporate rule overall. 2024 is about surviving to fight another day. Frank Thorne says, TYT calling balls and strikes. We appreciate you, Frank. Thomas Daniel says, over the weekend I drove past a sign on a lawn that said, vote American, not Democrat. It made my head hurt. Thomas, I mean, look, the great irony for Republicans who think that they're like all American, they're like, well, we love Donald Trump. And when he said terminate the Constitution because he didn't win, that was the most American thing he could do. What? No, that's the least American thing he could do. No, that's because he's, and let's be honest, he looks like us, he acts like us, he thinks like us. And to them, that's America. Not the actual Constitution, not the flag, not the idea of America, not any of our principles. It's just they think we're America. And if you don't look like us and you don't act like us, you're not real America. And then they go, why don't you vote for me? Oh, really? Yeah. What a compelling case. I'll take it under advisement. Okay, on Twitch, the Mighty Decoy says, don't worry about Trump winning. The Key says it's going to be Harris. That's funny, nice callback. No Math Dragon says, Trump is telling everybody who he is and what he'll do. Believe him. Yeah, I believe him. That's the one thing I definitely believe him on, unfortunately. All right, we'll be right back. All right, back on the show here, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also these wonderful people, Terry Zindler, Kimberly Wagner, they just hit the join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate you guys. Jesse and Box gifted 5 subs, so they're American heroes. Now, I want to tell you about a couple of things that are coming up. First of all, Trump brackets has finally narrowed down the top 64. We're going to start playing on Thursday. There's going to be a significant prize involved. So when we start telling you to fill out your prediction brackets, please make sure you're doing that and spread the word when we get there on Thursday. I appreciate you guys. Tomorrow we'll be covering the debate, and you can watch it on tyt.com/debate, because then we'll have us, then the debate, and then back to us again, and it's all on the same page. And I'll be taking your questions, answering, commenting, etc., all on tyt.com/debate. So make sure you don't miss it. It is going to be monumentally important. And then I want to go to some of our members on tyt.com. Biden Flavor Corn Pop says, here's to James Earl Jones, an African-American man with integrity who performed one of the few roles in the United States history that never typecast him as black or any bloody color, the voice of Darth Vader. It is ironic that he played the main evil guy, but he did it in a way that kind of gave pride and was divorced from color, so that's great. Preston Park says, it's wild that Charlie Kirk can have decent conversations with Anna and Cenk at the conventions, but then he goes on his show to spew nonsense constantly. Yeah, I am a little amazed by that. I was amazed by the conversation in the first place, But then when I see him go back to madness, I don't know.
Do better, Charlie. Come on. Come on. I mean, that. Again, if the migrant issue is an issue you care about, you want people to take you seriously, you can't be making up insane claims like this. I mean, who's gonna trust you after you put out insane claims like that are easily disproven?
Yeah. So last couple here, Jesus Take the Wheel says, in Donald Trump's defense, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. It never ceases to amaze me how fully grown adults can believe Trump's, it's only rigged if I lose logic.
I know, for real.
I know, come on.
He's already saying the election is rigged now, right now.
Because he's worried he's gonna lose.
Exactly, he's setting the stage up for another disaster like we experienced after the 2020 presidential.
More riots, more madness, more crying, more, okay. Oh, I hate the guy.
Here's why I could never vote for Donald Trump in a million years, okay? And it's just who I am. I like leaders, I like strong leaders who want to do the right thing and lead. And when Trump does that, all he comes across as, to me, first of all, someone who doesn't respect our country, someone who doesn't respect our government, someone who doesn't respect the American people and who they prefer to win the election, obviously. That's without even needing to be said. But what also really bothers me is he looks like a little child throwing a temper tantrum. He does not look like a leader, he doesn't act like a leader. That's another thing about him that bothers me. I would never support someone like that, whether it's Trump or any other politician. I don't want a politician who acts like a child.
And he's obsessed with himself, doesn't care about anyone else.
Yeah, I believe in honor. I believe in duty. I believe in, respect, all of that stuff that's supposed to be core tenets of conservatism. What happened to that?
Yeah, that's the thing I was gonna say. I mean, it's interesting that you believe in that stuff. When conservatives say that honor is the #1 thing that they care about, Trump is the most dishonorable man I've ever seen in politics. And that's saying a lot. There's a lot of terrible politicians. He has no honor at all. He doesn't care about reality. And guys, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how the government works. I mean, who writes after an election, maybe we should terminate the Constitution? Even if you're dictatorial, that's not a thing. The fact that he doesn't know that we can't just decide to terminate the Constitution, there's no process for terminating a Constitution. He's so dumb, it drives me crazy. All right, last two things here. Cerberus Dragon says about the interview we just did, this is the kind of BS Anna goes through for reporting the news. So glad TYT booked this interview. Thank you, appreciate that.
I know that at some point in the past, I've been critical of Olivia Nuzzi. And look, I've grown so much in recent years. I don't even know if I would agree with my criticism toward her from the past. But I will say this, I personally needed to have that conversation because I give her a lot of credit for being willing to just remain neutral in regard to what she prefers and do the honest reporting that's necessary to inform people. Democratic voters deserved to know the truth about Biden, and the fact that they tried to hide it from people is just incredibly gross to me. We need journalists like Nuzzi that'll tell the truth, regardless of the attacks that she's gonna get.
So, okay, I'll read the rest of the comments later, but I've got to say one thing about that. Guys, so you see, I just told you I loathe Donald Trump, and if you watch Young Turks on a regular basis, you know that with every fiber of your being, right? But when Trump does something right, I say that is correct, and I give him credit. I might like a Democrat, but if he does something wrong, I say that's wrong, and I tell you why it's wrong. Because it's one thing to want one thing and to prefer one thing. It's another thing to lie or be honest. And so I choose to be honest with you. But if you, the audience, look, our audience is amazing, but I'm saying this at large to all the audiences out there. You've got to make a choice. Do you want to listen to a propagandist, or do you want to listen to people who are honest about the news? And a lot of people, okay, you want to pick propagandists, no problem, okay? But understand that you're listening to a propagandist. And if you want reality and people trying their hardest to find out what's true, then pick a news show, right? And I don't mean mainstream media. I mean any news show that you think is trying really hard to get to objective reality. Okay, we got to take another break here. We'll be right back. Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
TYT is thankful for all the support we've received from our audience. I know that we're all living through a dark time. The economy's a mess. The two-party system is failing us, and the threat of climate change is growing. I started this company in my apartment, and look where we are today. I've experienced what we can accomplish when we work together. So let's keep working towards positive change. Join our community at tyt.com/team.
TYT has been around for over 2 decades, and we don't plan on stopping anytime soon. We want to continue providing our audience with fact-based reporting, insightful commentary, and thought-provoking analysis. But times have changed. We're fighting an uphill battle against overbearing social media companies and their anti-news algorithms. We need viewers like you to become members to ensure our future. Join us at tyt.com/team.
What's that you're looking at? Scan around and find out. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also Domo Juice, Used to Party, and Gus24. Those just became members through tyt.com/team. We appreciate you guys. Anna.
Well, there's this.
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
That's not a deep fake. That was.
Last Friday, former Vice President Dick Cheney and former Senator Liz Cheney, obviously both Republicans, revealed that they will in fact be voting for Kamala Harris. And you heard a little bit of that endorsement in the clip we just showed you. Now, Kamala Harris has taken these endorsements as cause for celebration, which is concerning to say the least. Let me be generous to the Democratic Party and not lose my mind over this yet, but I'll give you more details. So we should also note that Dick Cheney issued a statement regarding his endorsement, saying that in our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to, by the way, I mean, you should take a good hard look at the administration you served in, but I'll continue. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He can never be trusted with power again, said Dick Cheney, who has absolutely no self-awareness. There's more. As citizens, we each have a duty to put country above partisanship, to defend our Constitution. That is why I will be casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. And here's how Harris, well, before we get to how Harris reacted to it, Cenk, what are your thoughts? Are you elated over neocon warmongers and war criminals like the Cheneys supporting Kamala Harris?
Nah, it's a terrible development. And the fact that the Democrats are excited by it just shows you everything that's wrong with the Democratic Party. That's Dick Cheney, who, by the way, left office with a 9% approval rating. What are you guys celebrating? He's one of the most hated politicians in our lifetime. He's the guy who brought torture back. He's the one that did all of the lies and orchestrated the totally needless war in Iraq that got hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians killed, let alone our soldiers, let alone the trillions we wasted on his friends and corrupt colleagues at Halliburton with the no-bid contracts, et cetera. But you want to talk about stealing an election. Now, he's right that Donald Trump tried to steal an election because a broken clock can be right twice a day. I get it. But I saw you guys steal the 2000 election with my own eyes.
We don't talk about that. Memory hole, memory hole. Yeah. Quick, Democrats, memory hole, memory hole.
So in 2000, not only did Al Gore win the popular vote, but after the Supreme Court said, we don't care about states' rights, Florida, you are to stop counting right now. Don't count the votes, okay? Later, because the votes existed, the press organizations counted the votes, and it turned out if you counted all the votes in Florida, no matter how you counted them, undervotes, overvotes, it didn't matter. Hanging chads, nothing mattered. Al Gore had won the state of Florida. He actually won the Electoral College. But Fox News helped Dick Cheney and George Bush steal that election. Now he's pretending to be a savior of democracy, and the Democrats are like, bravo, the savior of democracy, Dick Cheney has ridden to the rescue. God, you guys don't know anything about politics. The country hates this guy. You're wrong on principle and you're wrong on politics.
If Kamala Harris were smart about this endorsement, she would do everything in her power to speak to the Cheneys and encourage them to not go public. Please don't endorse me. And if you're going to vote for me, great, I appreciate it. But you had a 9% approval rating. Everyone hated you for good reason. Okay, but that's not what happened. Let's take a look at how Kamala Harris reacted to the endorsement last week.
What do you think? I'm honored to have their endorsement, and I think that what they both, as leaders who are well respected, are making an important statement that it's okay and if not important to put country above party. And I'm honored to have their support, and I think it's an important statement right now. A lot of what I think is happening, and I was just talking with some folks here in Pittsburgh about it, is that people are exhausted about the division and the attempts to kind of divide us as Americans. And them stepping up to make this public statement, I think, is courageous, but also for people like the folks I was just talking with, it really reinforces for them that we love our country and we have more in common than what separates us.
No, Kamala, you're not getting it, okay? People are exhausted from the division among ordinary voters. In fact, we would like more division among the politicians because we're not getting enough of that. The idea that we need unity between Bush-era neocon Republicans and the Democratic Party is laughable to me. And what's amazing is you have Donald Trump who's like throwing a hissy fit over the Cheneys not endorsing him. They did you a favor, Trump. I wish they would have done that favor to Kamala Harris and the Democrats, but the Democrats, open arms. Memory hole the Bush era, memory hole the war crimes, memory hole the torture, the warrantless wiretapping, the lies that got us into that war in Iraq in the first place. Ignore all of that because we share an enemy and our enemy is Donald Trump. So as long as we share that enemy, let's launder the reputations of some of the worst people in this country, including the Cheneys.
I'm going to tell you why, because this is the interesting part in my opinion. First, I'm going to give a shout out to one of our members on Twitch. Felicity91 said, Dick Cheney is the biggest warmonger ever. This isn't a good thing. This man hasn't changed his ways.
Criminal, war criminal.
Yeah, so that's obvious to anyone who is paying attention. And thank you for writing in. Become a member, hit the join button below, be part of the show. Now, look, why did the Democrats, the establishment, et cetera, hate Donald Trump so much, but they don't mind Dick Cheney? So like I can understand having deep problems with both, but I can't understand not minding Dick Cheney, right? And then you look at MSNBC's rundown and it's filled with former Republicans and Bush officials. So Michael Steele was the head of the RNC during Bush. Nicole Wallace was his communications director, chief propagandist.
Bill Kristol.
Right, Bill Kristol, et cetera, are all there as contributors. And people now think that the left-wing position is former Republicans who are neocons and love corporate power.
No, thank you.
So
no, thank you.
And they didn't even notice. So this is what drives me crazy about politics too. Like George H.W. Bush's foreign policy was 100% the opposite of George W. Bush's policy. Their son and father, obviously both president, their foreign policy is exactly opposite, and no one in mainstream media noticed. It's just amazing. Anyway, but back to the Democrats and why they don't mind Dick Cheney as much. Because for corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, as long as everyone is feeding the system and the establishment wins as a class, they're happy. The rest is just theater. Good cop, bad cop. Oh my God, they are so bad. I cannot believe they cut taxes. Oh, I cannot believe they invaded another country and the defense contractors got billions of dollars. Oh, golly gee. Oh, so did the oil companies. They don't mind any of that because their entire class is winning.
Guys,
right?
do you know how many? Sorry. So go ahead, Jim.
Let me just finish.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
Okay, but for Trump, like this is why right now he's leading, because everyone thinks the establishment hates him, so he must be the populist good guy. But they don't ask why does the establishment hate him? The establishment hates him not because he's standing up to them and fighting for the little guy. They hate him because he's only stealing on his own behalf. Whereas Dick Cheney, George Bush, and the others were stealing on behalf of the upper class. So they're saying Trump is also a thief and a liar, but he's too selfish. He should be sharing with the rest of the upper class, and he's not. So that's why they hate Trump. Not because he's stealing, not because he's a liar, not because of his bad policies. In fact, remember the thing that they said they hated the most, kids in cages, the immigration policies, the terrible immigration policies of Trump. They just tried to pass Trump's immigration policies. They don't hate him based on policy or content. They hate him because he won't share the loot. So they're both criminals. They both steal tremendous amounts of money. Dick Cheney and Donald Trump is that Cheney helps everyone else steal it too in the upper class.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And it's shameful that Democrats would be welcoming toward neocon Republicans who, I mean, the whole reason why I got involved in political news is because I was growing up at a time when our civil liberties were being violated, when our men and women in our armed services were being sent to multiple deployments to Iraq, a war that we should not have been in. And then they were being neglected once they came home and had severe mental health issues, including PTSD, as a result of those multiple deployments. The idea that we should be welcoming to people like Dick Cheney is just disgusting and shameful. And it's sad that this is where the Democratic Party is. Because Donald Trump will break everyone's brains and will forget everything that happened in recent history in order to attempt to defeat him. But I don't think this helps in attempting to defeat him. I don't think a Cheney endorsement for Kamala Harris is a net positive. So, all right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the latest New York Times Sienna College poll. It does show Kamala Harris slipping a little bit, so we'll talk about that and more when we return.
All right, guys, as you can see, we're trying to come up with creative ways to make this show and this network sustainable because we don't have the Russians giving us $100,000 a pop. We don't have giant corporate advertisers, et cetera. So we serve you guys. So if you can help, tyt.com/team, as you know. But also, since people do these wonderful things and give us sometimes big chunks of money, we try to do something back and have you guys be part of the show, whether it's reading your comments or naming things in the studio for you guys. So our gavel is called Charlie Rules. Someone was kind enough to name it after Anna's dog because they know how much she loves him. And then my light is named Jeffrey Manzer. So hey Jeffrey, how you doing? Okay, and then my office has now got a plaque. It says Caregiving Bliss. And it's beautiful that you named it that. And so I touch that every time I come in, and it's a great note for me, and I appreciate you guys so much. So if you want to do something along those lines where you're a little bit more generous, we'd love to name it after you or anything that you want. So tyt.com/perks. We appreciate you guys, and we do this for you and with you. It's truly a show of the people, by the people, for the people. Art Guy writes in at the beginning of the show, hi folks, there's nothing like waking up 1 minute before TYT starts and getting a white hot injection of news straight to the eyeball. I like that, it's funny. Reflect Kindness says, woo, first time I've been able to watch live in weeks, and the awful story of the woman who ate a cat is involved. Cenk, please give us good news or cute stories about meowsers. Have you officially adopted them? I don't know that it's official yet, but it's on the, well, I'll tell you this much. The guys came over to watch football on Sunday, and Ben Mankiewicz threatened to steal him. That if we're not going to adopt him, his daughter said, just grab him and run. They're going to adopt him. So he's going to stay in the TYT family one way or another. But Michael Schur, Ben Mankiewicz, Mark Thompson. So we're also friends. And we watch football and we gamble on football together. They all loved meowsers. Mark Thompson, as you might be, you're not going to be surprised to find out, is a huge cat lover. Has cats and is awesome to cats. And he gave me tips on how to take care of meowsers. So that's how I spent my Sunday. Revenge Dragon says, well, the Democrats had to replace Henry Kissinger with somebody. Right, that's what I was thinking too. Thanks for writing that in. Karen Blardinelli said, I'm so happy I'm a baby boomer and I finally convinced one of my friends to watch TYT. And they love it. Thank you for all your hard work. Karen, you're the best. Thanks for doing that. Guys, so we asked you to chip in every once in a while, but the main thing, the thing you could do that doesn't cost anything is spread the word. Spread the word. There's actually honest news out there, and we're actually trying to do some good things in the world and drive a little bit of positive change, and we do it together with you guys. So now let's go to Ginger Red Shoes, who's a YouTube member. She wrote in, a leader gets out in front and does the work. Bossy Pants sits in the back and screams to get their own way. Ginger, I love that. And I love the word bossy pants. Might use that from now on. Be Kind Dragon disagrees with us and says, this may sway some Republicans to vote blue. Come on, guys. I hear you, of course. Look, to be fair, we should mention that. Thank you for bringing that up. I get that it might move some tiny amount of Republicans in the legendary suburbs to vote for Kamala Harris, but it isn't worth getting the stench of Dick Cheney on you because it's going to drive away so many other voters.
I mean, do you guys think that the hawkish portion of Kamala Harris's speech was an accident at the DNC? I'm worried about the influence on the Democratic.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also Celestial Seer Dragon and Libre Alma. They're the American heroes who hit the join button below the video on YouTube. And Chris Birch gifted 5 subs. Mega hero. We appreciate all you guys. Love doing the show with you. Anna.
Let's talk about the presidential race and what the latest polling says. So, the New York Times Sienna College poll that just came out spells some trouble for Kamala Harris as it finds that her opponent Donald Trump is ahead nationally. Now, look, we all knew that there was going to be a bit of a honeymoon period with Kamala Harris being the new Democratic nominee. It does appear that some of that has faded, and it does appear that some of that is being reflected in this polling. Now, when it comes to national polling, keep in mind that the Democrat would have to win by 5 points in order to win the Electoral College. But in this case, with this one poll, you see that Kamala Harris is not ahead, okay? So Donald Trump is ahead 48% to Kamala Harris's 47%. I should note that the New York Times has a margin of error of plus or minus 3 points. And we should also take a look at how this particular poll compares to others, right? Because it's not just about one poll. One poll could be an outlier, but let's look at the average of polling. Let's see what the other polls say. So luckily, the New York Times provided that information for us. And as you can see here, the average of polls shows Harris up nationally by 2 points. It's still not enough to win the Electoral College, but it is obviously better than the New York Times poll showing Trump winning by a few points. Now, the Ipsos poll is the most Harris friendly, with her leading by 6 points, but that's the only one that shows her with a big enough lead. All of the others have Harris leading by just 1 point. So, making matters worse, we're about to get into the details about how they're performing in the swing states. And remember, at the end of the day, the election is decided by these battleground states. Before we get to that, Cenk, thoughts?
Yeah, first thing is it real? So they did oversample Republicans a little bit, so it might be a little bit worse in this New York Times poll than the average. Not it might be, it is worse than the average, so keep that in mind. Having said that, it's definitely real. Why is it real overall? Because other polls are showing deterioration in the swing states for Kamala Harris. So when you have all those polls headed in the same direction, that's when you know it's real. So you can tell yourself pretty little lies, and both Republicans and Democrats do it. Whenever you're down in the polls, you say the polls aren't real. And we've shown you now endless times where both sides have done it, depending on whether they were losing or winning the polls. But it's really important that you be honest with yourself, otherwise you can't course correct and then you'll lose. So after we show you the swing state problems, I want to come back and explain to you why Kamala Harris surged. There's very clear reasons why, and why she's now losing that momentum. I think there's also equally clear reasons why she's losing the momentum.
So the swing states do spell a little bit of trouble for Kamala Harris as well, and there is a statistical tie, according to the New York Times Sienna College polling here, in the following states. There's Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And so in all of those states, it is a statistical tie. So in some of them, they're completely tied. In some of these states, Trump might lead by 1 point. In others, Harris might lead by 1 point. But at the end of the day, when you consider the margin of error for this poll, they are in a statistical tie. Now, this is the first major poll showing Kamala slipping a little in the polls since she became the nominee, following Biden dropping out. And this means that the stakes are obviously high for Kamala Harris in the presidential debate that will take place this week. So look, we should talk also about what the voters are saying, what the voters told pollsters about how they're feeling about the two different candidates. So the survey found that 28% of likely voters say that they felt they needed to know more about Kamala Harris, while only 9% said that they needed to know more about Trump. So this could actually be a silver lining for Harris, or at least an opportunity for growth for Harris, because most voters feel that they already know enough about Trump. So they've made up their minds about Donald Trump, whereas Harris could make some leeway with voters, the 28% who feel like they don't know enough about her to make a decision yet. So that's good news, right? A lot of people out there who haven't made up their minds yet are still open-minded to Harris, and she could definitely persuade them. And that's why I think that this polling is important for her to take seriously. Now, 5% of likely voters surveyed said that they're undecided, in addition to that 28%, by the way, who say that they don't know enough about Harris. 5% of likely voters surveyed said that they're undecided and did not lean toward either major party candidate. And those are really the people who are going to decide the election at the end of the day. Harris held on to some of the gains that she made with key groups that Biden was slipping with, including women, young voters, and Latino voters. However, and this is really interesting, even Kamala Harris is now struggling to build a solid lead with Latino voters. It appears that Donald Trump has made some significant gains with Latinos. Now, the respondents also say that they trust Trump more on specific issues like the economy and immigration, whereas voters trust Harris more on topics like saving our democracy and abortion. And I do want to give you some quotes as well. 47% of likely voters viewed Harris as too liberal, compared with 32% who say that Trump is too conservative. More than 60% of likely voters said the next president should represent a major change from Biden, but only 25% said that vice president or the vice president, meaning Kamala Harris, represented that change, while 53% said that Trump, the former president, did.
Yeah, that's the key one. So I want to focus on that. Yeah. So why did Kamala Harris surge in the beginning? Number one, she looked like the change candidate all of a sudden out of nowhere, because everybody was sick of Biden and Trump, and they couldn't wait for anyone that wasn't Biden or Trump. Kamala Harris comes in, they're like, great, change, okay? And she surges. So that's point one. Then she picked Tim Walz, and Tim Walz is not a standard politician. He's more of a folksy, regular guy, and more of a populist, progressive, et cetera, in an economic way that actually delivered for the average voter in Minnesota. So they're like, okay, that's good, that's the second reason. Then she comes up with an economically populist agenda, and people like it. They're like, oh, okay, she's gonna check the big corporations that are price gouging us. She's gonna do something about housing prices that are out of control. So boom, she surges. And whereas Biden was down by about 5, in one of the polls he was down by 8, she takes the lead and goes all the way up 3.5 points. Now she's been losing that lead ever since. So what changed? A couple of things. Number one, they stopped doing all media. Oh, that's so dumb. That's millions and eventually hundreds of millions of dollars in free media. Why don't you go and make your case? And if you say, no, both Harris and Walz are so incompetent that if they are interviewed, they can't make their own case, well, then you're sending a giant message of weakness. And then you're forcing all of the media to talk about how you won't talk to them, because they get obsessed with that, right? And they're right too. You need to be challenged and questioned if you're going to be president of the United States. So now you've got a giant negative story just sitting there for no reason. Self-inflicted harm. It's insanity, right? And then what did you do? Now CNBC anchors start yelling at you. We've been covering that on the show the last couple of weeks. She starts retracting some of her policies. Disaster. Now we're reeling. What are you doing? And finally, on the issue of change, the most important issue there is, if you're the change candidate, you're gonna win. If you're the status quo candidate, you're gonna lose. So Anna just read you 60% of voters, it's actually 61, of likely voters, the next president should represent a major change from Biden, right? Now, let me read you the devastating details on where Kamala and Trump lie on that. So this is still from the New York Times, obviously. God damn it. Okay, here it is, only 40% of likely voters said Ms. Harris represented change, while 55% said she represented more of the same. That's devastating. Mr. Trump, in contrast, was seen as representing change by 61% of voters, while only 34% said he was more of the same. He's got a huge advantage now as a change candidate. So she has to take that mantle, but I'm not sure she realizes it, because in Democratic Party circles, they think the status quo is great. If you're the defender of the status quo, America's not going to vote for you. You had it as the change candidate for that month. You've got to go back to that and win that mantle. If Trump is seen as the change candidate, he's going to win this election.
Yeah. Final thing I'll leave you with, I thought that this quote was really interesting. It's from a 31-year-old vaccine scientist in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is an individual who has already committed to voting for Kamala Harris. His name is Matthew Tucker. But he says this in regard to the Democratic Party and whether he feels confident that Kamala Harris is going to respond or react to the immigration appropriately. He says, "It's not like I'd lay it all on her," meaning the problems at the border, "but I'm not sure that I heard enough about her trying to deal with that. And I would like to hear more from Democrats or Republicans on more creative solutions to that problem rather than just putting up walls." Now, again, this is a Democratic voter who's already committed to voting for Kamala Harris. It's not about Democrats who are, partisans and they're gonna vote for the Democrat no matter what. At the end of the day, it comes down to those independent swing voters who might agree with him on that issue, and they want to see more from Kamala Harris in regard to what her solutions are, not just on immigration, but other issues as well. And so that kind of goes to your point, Cenk. It's important for her to do more of these interviews and to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. And I know that that's a difficult thing to do because she doesn't want to disrespect Biden.
Who cares?
Yeah,
Disrespect him.
I know. I mean,
are you crazy? You're worried about this? Joe Biden is an anchor tied around her legs, and you're worried, oh, I might be impolite to him. Who cares? Win the goddamn election. So look, guys, the debate tomorrow night, obviously we're gonna cover it. We always cover it. We're gonna give you analysis, but you could actually watch it also on tyt.com/debate. We're gonna embed the debate and we're gonna show you pre and post debate analysis. Now, the reason why I mention that is because it's critical and she's got to turn around, and I don't know if she's gotten the message. And so last point here is, the other thing that people want is strength from their leaders. So when you're hiding from the press, you look weak. And when you're flip-flopping on your positions, you look weak. Now, Trump does it, but he does it in a weird aggro way where he'll say one thing and like, oh, I definitely won the election, terrible. And then he go do an interview and be like, I lost the election, I won the election. He'll say two different things, but he'll say both of them while screaming. And you might say, oh, he's unhinged and crazy, etc. But at least he has the outward appearance to some voters of being strong. He isn't, but he has that appearance. When you're like, oh, I don't want to get interviewed. Oh my God, that looks so weak. You need to go out there and make your case. Say, this is why I'm gonna deliver. This is what I'm gonna do for you. If you're just sitting there doing canned speeches for rallies, that you're not gonna win this race. You know what the problem is, guys? She kept the Biden campaign team. And they're an anchor wrapped around the entire Democratic Party. And it's their dumbass strategy, and this is sourced. I've read it now in several articles. The old Biden team is like, don't talk to the press. The press might be slightly mean to you. Hide from them for the entire campaign. All right, well, if you listen to that, it's a guaranteed loss.
Well, we have some insight into whether or not Kamala Harris is going to carry out progressive economic policies, and that's based on some revelations that were shared by Mark Cuban on CNBC. So when we come back, we'll get into that interview and more. Don't miss it.
All right, back on TYT. Megan Bramble says, just giving more because Cenk and Anna are my fave duo. And I tell everyone here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania to watch TYT. Been watching since 2015. Keep it coming, guys. Megan, you're awesome. Thank you. Keep spreading the word. And thank you for the super chat. Here's another one. A dog formerly known as Cat wrote in. I took a month off of work to move across the country and take a break from the real world. Now I'm back and I hate it here.
Yep. Agreed.
I hear you, brother, but you know what? We got this crazy little community here at TYT where we're hanging in there together, okay, like meowsers, and we're trying to make the world a little bit better by being honest about it and trying to drive positive change. So we appreciate all you guys, and our members help us do that. If you want to be a member, tyt.com/team is a great way of doing it. All right, so let me go to some of those members. Jack Callahan says, seems like Harris is getting bad advice. Can't Walz steer her in the right direction? For a while, it looked like she was getting great advice when she picked Walz and she released her economic agenda. But I guess she went back to listening to people who don't make any sense. Like, look, I have no respect for the Biden campaign team. They're the worst at politics, the absolute worst. So if she's listening to them, that's what's causing all this. And the reports say that she is listening to them. They're the ones telling her, don't do media, hide in a basement. That strategy is so mind-bendingly dumb. I can't stand it. So anyways, no, look, I don't know where Tim Walz is. And we're so excited about Tim Walz. They won't let him do interviews. They won't even let him answer questions that reporters shout out when he's doing an appearance. Oh, you have a really popular guy and you choose to put him in a basement. The Biden campaign team all of them should be fired immediately. What are you keeping this cancer around for? They're the guys who are losing to Trump by 8 points. Okay. Panic on Funkatron says, Republicans light will lose to real Republicans every time because people can tell you're fake. Oh, I agree with that 100%. We're going back to being fake Republicans with Dick Cheney, etc. ACGC says, you know, every time I hear and see Anna's Bible rant, I want to go into the local library and move the Bible to the Bibles to the fiction section, LOL. Okay, everybody's different on that, but I appreciate you. And I am almost out of time. So John WF001, Nathan Maka 01, and It's a Me. Thank you so much, guys. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Well, let's hear from Mark Cuban.
People have suggested she's going to operate even to more to the left of Biden as it relates to regulation, potentially taxes, other things related to business.
Kamala Harris is pro-business. This is Kamala Harris's campaign. It's not Joe Biden's campaign, right? Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. You know, I've talked to the Biden administration, I've talked to the Trump administration, I've talked to the Obama administration, and I think the Harris administration has been most open. Let me just tell you, I probably talk to them, and I know others do as well, 3-4 times a week about what's the best approach to taxing the wealthy and increasing revenues and cutting costs for that matter.
Wealthy man Mark Cuban called into CNBC to assure everyone that there's no need to panic about Kamala Harris potentially pursuing progressive economic policies because it ain't gonna happen. In fact, Mark has been having some interesting conversations and he's shedding light on those conversations with Kamala Harris. Let's hear more.
A lot of folks have come on our broadcast who are critical of the vice president and her campaign have suggested that she's a progressive and that she is going to operate very similarly to Biden, or in some cases, people have suggested she's going to operate even to more to the left of Biden as it relates to regulation, potentially taxes, other things related to business. On the other side, you hear, at least privately, from folks in and around the Biden campaign saying, no, we're really tacking to the middle. What do you think is really happening here?
Kamala Harris is pro-business. This is Kamala Harris's campaign. It's not Joe Biden's campaign, right? Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. They're very, very different. She's trying to be, again, this is my perspective. She's trying to be very respectful of the president and everything he's proposed. She's trying not to directly contradict him in any way. So she talks a little bit around the subject when it comes to taxing in particular, but she's going center 100%.
So, look, I am sharing this with everyone because these are the types of clues that should be paid attention to in predicting what an administration is going to be like. Now, I already kind of had an inkling that Kamala Harris was kind of moving toward, as Mark Cuban is like referring to it, the center when it comes to economic policies. I also got that sense after she became the Democratic nominee, and honestly, in the beginning, Bernie Sanders was just kind of like hesitant about it. And I knew that it had to do with where she stands on some of these issues versus Biden, who was a little more left wing on some of these economic policies, relatively speaking. And that relatively speaking part is really important because obviously there's been a lot of neoliberal policies that have been endorsed by Democrats in recent years. So Biden kind of moved on that a little bit. But what do you think, Cenk?
Yeah, so first off, he said, oh, they're not the Biden administration. They're more pro-business. Oh boy.
I know, yeah.
And then he even mentioned Barack Obama and how she's more pro-business than Obama. Obama did the bank bailouts. In Obama's recovery in 2010, more than 90% of the gains went to the top 1%. If she's more pro-corporate than that, Jesus, what are we gonna get? So progressives, I need you to, please, I don't want you to get your heart broken and then collapse into a black pill universe and despondent. She's not gonna do any of the progressive things she's saying. She's not gonna do the overwhelming majority of them. She's gonna do the same thing that all Democrats do, release valve. Just 5% to 10% change so there isn't a physical revolution, right? Now, that being said, the Republicans go in the wrong direction, opposite direction. They make it more pro-corporate, and Trump is going around bragging about how he's the most corporate guy in the world, and he's gonna give them even bigger tax cuts and more deregulation and more mergers and everything that they ever wanted, right? Because he's trying to get their donor money. So it's relative. So as I watched that whole interview, look, Mark Cuban was a relative good guy here. He's a rich guy saying corporate capital gains is at 24%. Kamala Harris wants to move it to 28%, and I agree. The capital gains tax on people like me should be higher, he's saying. Okay, now look, we can make an argument for being a better rate than that and higher than that, and we can agree and disagree in parts with Mark Cuban, but he's trying to push in the right direction, so he's not the bad guy here, okay? But when you look at the number that they put up on the screen of Biden saying the capital gains rate should be 44%. But guys, the whole conversation is nonsense. She's not gonna move it from 24 to 28. She's not gonna move it at all. Biden said it should be 44. Is it 44? No, it's 24, because he didn't do anything to move it. He didn't do anything. That's what Democrats do 98% of the time. They give you all these promises during an election cycle, and then you have debates, nonsense debates on CNBC about what they're promising to do. It doesn't really matter because they almost never do what they promise. So of course, same is true of Trump on steroids. Never, I promise you the wall. At the couple of months before the election, right, the wall, I forgot about the wall. But he didn't forget to bring corporate taxes from 35% down to 21% and give trillions of dollars to his rich friends.
God, I'm so black-pilled. I'm just so black. What are we rooting for here? You know what I'm saying?
I know, that's a great question.
What are we rooting? What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to cheerlead that? Look, you should vote for, I don't, anyway, go ahead. Tell me what we should root for.
So look, guys, there's a camp that says, Kamala Harris is the savior, or she's gonna be amazing, she's gonna do all these things. And by the way, 90% of that camp, after she does, because more establishment Democrats, right? After she doesn't do those things, they'll come back and yell at us and go, that's unreasonable to ask for her to do all those things. Well, then why are you excited about it now? When later you're gonna tell me that she had no chance of ever passing them, and the parliamentarian, and we're unreasonable for asking her to do the things that she promised, right? So that's the same cycle that happens every time with the Democrats. The Republicans are even more corporate, et cetera, as I've explained, and Donald Trump's a raging lunatic. So what am I fighting for as a populist progressive? I'm fighting to live today to fight another day, okay? So Trump is so unhinged. He's talking about arresting his political opponents. He's talking about arresting anyone that he says doesn't agree that there was mail-in fraud. The election hasn't even happened. He says unhinged things 24/7, makes up crazy stuff, and has already tried to end democracy and said that we should terminate the Constitution. And no, he wasn't joking. No, it wasn't taken out of context. When he lost the elections, he said, let's just get rid of the Constitution. I'm not handing the country over to a madman. So now, but I don't think Kamala Harris is the savior. So what we're doing is live to fight another day. At some point, you need a populist to rise up on the Democratic side and win a presidential primary. And then you've got a fighter's chance. But right now, we're just like, this election is to just survive. You're not gonna get to have a vote for a populist progressive or an economic populist on the right. You're not gonna get to vote for any of those guys if you put in the guy who says, if I lose, then it wasn't a real election, it was rigged, with no evidence at all, a giant liar who doesn't like the idea of democracy and has said it 1,000 times, right? How much clearer does he have to be? So I will hold Kamala Harris accountable. We all need to hold Kamala Harris accountable. If you go back to, I will bow down to Kamala Harris, we should always bow down to the Democrats, even if they never deliver, then no, we gain nothing from this election. We have to survive, and then, for God's sake, a populist progressive must win in a primary. Otherwise, we will live in corporate rule forever.
Yeah, the idea of holding Kamala Harris accountable, let's also not pretend like that's a possibility. They don't care what we think. They don't care that we're upset at the broken promises. I mean, look at Joe Biden. I mean, he hasn't moved an inch when it comes to, the war in Gaza, because he doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him, right? Like, we're nothing to him, and we're nothing to Kamala Harris either. She wants to win. They're gonna tell us what we want to hear right now, but it's important to pay attention to what kind of conversations are happening in the rooms that we're not in, and that's what Mark Cuban is shedding light on. So let's watch the next clip and hear what he has to say about where she's getting her advice on economic policies.
I've talked to the Biden administration, I've talked to the Trump administration, I've talked to the Obama administration, and I think the Harris administration has been most open. I mean, they've been very clear to me and other business people that, look, we've realized that rich people have to pay their fair share, but we don't have all the answers. So Mark and others, what do you think is the best approach to taxing wealthy people so that they pay their fair share to help contribute to reducing the deficit, and we can come up with some new ideas? And let me just tell you, I probably talk to them, and I know others do as well, 3-4 times a week about what's the best approach to taxing the wealthy and increasing revenues and cutting costs for that matter.
Credit to Kamala Harris, that is a good source of information. I too like to ask the criminals how they'd like to be punished for the crimes they've committed.
Yeah, I know you're using an analogy here. Yeah. And so, and look, on the one hand, should you talk to business people and get their perspective? Of course you should, right? But you should also talk to other people. You should talk to everybody, progressive economists, conservative economists, because you don't want to miss anything. And because especially when you're doing regulation, if you do something slightly wrong, it could lead to bigger problems, okay? But once you've talked to everyone, you should make up your own mind and actually deliver for the American people. But what Anna and I are worried about is if you're talking to business leaders 3 to 4 times a week, as Cuban just said, that means that's the main people you're talking to. And you're getting that perspective, and even if they're good guys, they're gonna give you the perspective of, well, look, not too much taxes, not too much regulation. And remember, we have to have the mergers. And the stock market is paramount. So make sure the stock market is roaring, right? They won't even think that that's an open question. They all assume that that's your main goal is to help the stock market. But that doesn't help the average American much at all. And they're not even having that conversation. Instead, they're having this conversation 3 to 4 times a week.
I want to go to one more clip of the conversation and get a load of the framing from Andrew Ross Sorkin here. Let's watch.
what are the kinds of people you think she's ultimately going to appoint to her cabinet and around her? And I'm thinking of a Treasury Secretary. I'm thinking of,
I have no idea.
Folks who are going to run commerce. But I think it's an important question. I think it's a question about who's going to run the FTC, who's going to run antitrust for the DOJ. I mean, the Biden administration did not surround itself with virtually anybody from the private sector.
Right. I agree with you 100%. So two things. One, I told her team, look, put my name in for the FCC. It needs to change. And two, that I've strongly suggested that she put together a multi-level business advisory group. And they said, once we get past the debate, it's something we're going to look very strongly at. And when the details of that I suggested were, one, you have small entrepreneurs and just a council of those types of business people. Two, medium-sized companies, because they have different issues than smaller, larger. And then, the big companies, because they're going to have a completely different perspective.
Yeah, guys, we live under corporate rule. So my bias is that I kind of like Mark Cuban. And there's things that I disagree with him and things I've gotten angry about in regards to him, et cetera. And here, as I watch the whole interview, he's trying to get to the right place. But there's a giant problem here. Here's a Democratic donor saying, why don't you give me the FCC? On the other side, Trump is saying, oh, Elon Musk gave me a lot of money, so I'm going to have him audit the entire government and restructure the entire federal government because he's my donor. We've turned this into an open auction where the different donors are talking to both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump about how much they can help corporate rule and corporations. And they've totally lost the thread on how to help the actual average American. So this is exactly what's wrong with the system. All right, we've got an amazing bonus episode for the members. Hit the join button, become a member, or tyt.com/team, and we'll see you there.